Welcome to Studio C70 at the Committee of 70. Election Day is May 21st. It is a big primary, a whole bunch of offices on the ballot, judicial offices, city offices, 50 plus people running for city council, and elections are job interviews. The job applicants are the candidates and the voters are the hiring committee. We have one of the job applicants with us this morning, Adrian Rivera Reyes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All righty, so we only have 15 minutes here. Let's jump right in. Let's ask one of the big questions. Why are you running?
So I'm going to start with a little bit of my background and story. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. I come from a working class family. Like many families here in Philly, my story is very similar in the way that my parents struggled to be able to afford a home. My parents struggled to pay for healthcare, which we couldn't afford for a number of years. And my parents also, struggled to send me and my brother to school. And that is a story that is common to many Philadelphians in the city, especially when we look at the poverty rate of 26% in Philly. But, despite all of that, the two things that were always constant was I always had a roof over my head and I always had a good education. Good enough for me to come here to Philly and get my doctorate in cancer research. And so I'm the first doctor in my family, and that's, a source of pride for my parents. But, I have this scientific background, this healthcare background, and I've been dedicating my life up to this point to developing treatments and therapies for cancer. And so throughout my education, especially here in Philly at the University of Pennsylvania, I've become a labor organizer for the Graduate Employees Together UPenn, which was our unionization effort for grad students. I led the Science Policy and Diplomacy group at Penn as well for 3 years, which kind of started my into politics and getting involved with groups like 314 Action, which is a national group that endorses and helps candidate scientists run for office. So through that, I started getting more into the organizing world, the activist world. And then I served as a policy analyst for Molly Sheehan's campaign, who ran for Congress in Pennsylvania's 5th District, which includes parts of South Philly. So I am a scientist that, with a healthcare background, and that's what I will be bringing to City Council is the healthcare background, but also the mentality that, we need to look at evidence and facts before enacting policies, that we need evidence-based policy making. And a lot of the time, especially at the federal level, we see that alternative facts and whatever that means, and that's something that we are lacking right now. We don't have scientists on city council. We don't have doctors on city council. And then, there's the other aspect, I narrow it down to issues, but also diversity and representation. I belong to many communities in the city, like the LGBTQ community, I'm a millennial and also Latino that have very low representation in our city council, or no representation at all.
Yeah. So you've already gotten into a little bit about your background and your work history, the skills that you bring to the table. Could you speak to a little bit about, if you were to be part of the next council, an example of like how that background, like you'd bring to a specific issue, and then how you'd work with your colleagues in that legislature?
And that's extremely important, that second part that you just asked, because we know that to get anything done on city council, we need 9 votes, right? So it is, it is very important that we are able to find common ground and then be able to set up policies. I always talk that the cornerstone of my campaign is the Municipal Green New Deal for Philadelphia. And this is not only a plank or platform that's about climate justice itself, it's also about economic justice, it's also about creating jobs in our city, and it's also about racial equity, right? There is a lot of policy that we can draft and legislate from the climate change side, like updating building codes to meet green standards, making sure that we run SEPTA on renewable and electric energy, and then, but when we talk about, building, we also have to talk about our schools and how do we weatherize them, right? It's not only about getting rid of the lead and asbestos, which is a problem that then leads to other healthcare issues. And when we look at, the asthma rates in our city, and especially Black children in the city, are extremely high. And so, these are healthcare issues that are exacerbated by climate change and poor control of our ecosystem, but also by policy that hasn't been implemented. And I always say, like, wouldn't it be great that our economy moves entirely to a green new economy, which is where the future is taking us. And then that we are able to have a scientist on city council, right, helping lead the way in that sense, but then also that we keep in mind that all of this has to be coupled with job training programs, and that we are training our workforce, our Philadelphia workforce, for the jobs of the future, right? We cannot do this in vacuum. It has to be thinking about the people and, you know, getting them jobs so that we can help, you know, everyone climb out of poverty. And then of course this touches on education and funding our schools, which is extremely important because, you know, like I mentioned from my personal story, a good education is extremely important for our communities and our neighbors to climb out of poverty.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, there's certainly a great deal of policy that's happening at the local and state level. I feel like part of that is because there's so much less policy coming out of DC,
Yes.
and there has been for a while. And there's a whole set of issues there, which we won't get into this morning. So, you know, because there is so much more policy being made, not just at the state level in Harrisburg, but in Philadelphia. Let's talk a little bit about the decision-making process for you know, for this stuff. I mean, how City Hall works. Is it representative? Is it responsive? Is it open, transparent? If you know, if there's several things that you think could change for the better in how City Hall works, what would those things be?
I mean, we definitely have to be more transparent. You know, going back to the evidence-based part, right? We really have to be in tune to looking at the facts, looking at the data, and then engaging with communities. And one example that I'm going to bring up is, for example, this liquid natural gas plant that City Council is voting on that they want to put in Southwest Philly. Number one, that's not green energy. Number two, it's not good for the environment. Number three, that's a community that's already afflicted with high asthma rates, right? And that's not going to clean the air. And, you know, most importantly, the community doesn't even want it, right? So there is a lack in that way with people just and our council trying to push for agendas and specific policies that are not beneficial for communities and are not beneficial for our future, right? So we need to be very open and transparent with that. You know, that is a very easy decision that if you look at the facts and the data, we know that gas is in the future and we should not be investing in that we should take that space to clean it up and then start investing in solar power, which number one would help transform our economy. We can talk about microgrids, but then also it would be a source of revenue for the city because we could be selling solar energy elsewhere. And so we have to talk about that. We also have to talk about councilmanic prerogative and what that means, right? And so, you know, as an at-large candidate, we have less of a levi on that sense, but we need to be electing people that are willing to break with this tradition. And, you know, as a scientist, the first question that we always ask is why, right? And that is one of those traditions that our current council members have lacked the initiative to be like, you know, just to ask, but why? And so, you know, I think that people are paying attention and that we need to start there. We need to be open. We need to talk about our ward system and how to open it up to committee people and the residents, right? If we want to have a truly democratic society and a truly transparent government, the people need to have a say. And so in everything that I do, including, for example, when I propose this Green New Deal, this is not coming from me as a candidate. This is coming from me as a candidate, from input from the communities and also from the experts in that area, right? Like this has to be a collective effort in order for us to move forward.
Yeah. So you know, we at the Committee 70 put out this new platform, Philadelphia Resolution 1, this past week, PR1. We're calling it a nod to HR1 down in DC. It's a pro-democracy agenda. You know, up for discussion. We hope that the candidates and the city at large are talking about this stuff a bit more. You know, you just named the ward system. The ward system has a really powerful role in our elections and who wins public office.
Right.
I'm sure, like you've learned a bit in getting into this stuff. So, and you know, we at 70 we love elections. So could you, as far as like how elections work in Philadelphia, whether we're talking, you know, structurally, who can vote, who can't, you know, turnout, ward leaders and committee people's roles in this, you know, what's been your experience so far, and what would you like to see, you know, different? Let's say 4 years from now, and how we put people in public office.
I think that we really need to invest resources and times, and it has to come from the wards to encourage people to vote, right? We don't spend enough time doing that, and that's, you know, problematic. But also that's why the commissioner's race is extremely important. Not that I want to get too much into that, but it is extremely important, right? That we are electing city commissioners that are ensuring that everyone in the city is getting registered to vote. The ward system is archaic in many ways. It's been for a long time. And, you know, I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but I'm saying that there are things that need to change,
Mhm.
right? We need to make sure that the people, again, the residents of the wards and the committee people that are elected
Mhm.
have a say in who they want their ward to endorse and have a
Yeah.
say in who they want to be represented by, from the ward perspective. But, a lot of it is a consolidation of power and traditional power structures and how the party and the city has been run.
Mhm.
But, I think there's a future forward and that we need to start doing away with that and starting to open it up, right?
Mhm.
And there's this big initiative that I know Committee of 70 has been part of with the open ward system.
Mhm.
And we should be following that model if we truly want to be a democratic, city
Yeah.
where democracy is enacted
Yeah.
at all levels.
Yeah. That concept openness, I think, has come up a lot. This past year in this campaign system, in this campaign season. And as far as the elections go, I think something that a lot of folks, or at least some folks, don't realize about this spring is that only certain voters will be able to vote on candidates
Right.
on May 21st. Do you have any initial thoughts about how our primary system works in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Should it be different? That we have a closed primary system.
We have
right
a closed primary
Mhm.
system, so I view that as problematic.
Mhm.
I think that people, regardless of, should be able to vote.
Mhm.
We know that at the city level, county level, we can't change that we have to
Mhm.
go through Harrisburg and
Mhm.
do that sort of policy change, which is the complicated part,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But by being elected to city council, I will sure fight for that to happen.
Sure.
There's a lot of things that the state prevents us on doing on many issues, and Philadelphians want it, right?
Mhm.
We have to be transparent, but we also have to make sure that people are voting and that
Mhm.
people have the right to vote.
Mhm.
And just because we have a closed primary where only Democrats vote and Republicans vote, right?
Mhm.
What about all the other people that don't identify with a certain party?
Mhm.
That in the general election they have to choose from whatever was chosen in the primary.
Yeah.
And I think that's a failure in our system. I
Mhm.
think that everyone should have a voice despite of how they affiliate as to who gets to represent them.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like a lot of things in the city and in the state, because both are so old, whether it's the ward system or elections or election laws, which go back to 1937. I mean, there's just so many things we need to update. So again, we'd have to come back to that another day. So we have a few more minutes here. I'm going to give you the last word. What's the one thing that you would put your political capital into accomplishing if you were to win a term on council?
That's the Municipal Green New Deal.
Okay.
From day one, I was talking about this earlier actually when we know how the system works here in the primary, and I think that this is a massive resolution that we have to draft, and that comes with a bunch of policy ideas, right? And there are more complex, bigger ones, and then other that are smaller. But we need to start transitioning our city. And if there's something that I really want to accomplish, is making sure that our city is transitioning to a green new economy, and that while we're doing that, that we are bringing our neighborhoods and not leaving people behind. Because we know that this is also a platform for to tackle poverty and racial inequality in our city, which is a big driver of everything else and all the other issues that we face. And so it will be the Green New Deal, and making sure that we have a scientist leading the way in that way, and then getting 8 other city council members to agree, which, to be honest, I'd be surprised if they don't agree on climate change at this point. But maybe I'd be surprised.
Yeah. I appreciate the idea. Go big or go home,
right,
as they say.
Well, again, right, there are big things that we can do, but there are smaller things. Councilman Squilla introduced a ban on plastic bags. I think that's a good way to start. Then we should start with styrofoams and single-use plastics, but then go, like I mentioned, right, expanding SEPTA, making sure SEPTA is running on renewable energy, and committing City Council to reduce carbon emissions to zero by the year 2030, which this is coming from the recommendations from the United Nations, right? We don't have a lot of time before we start seeing different effects of climate catastrophe. As someone who grew up in Puerto Rico, right, I know what a hurricane can do, and Hurricane Maria, for example, that claimed over 3,000 lives. And so here in Philly, our most pressing problems right now that regard climate change are clean air and our asthma rates in our communities. But then if we look at the projections and the future of what's going to happen by 2050, a lot of the city could be underwater if we don't tackle climate change. And even more pressing than that, there are communities such as Hunting Park that are projected to be 15 degrees warmer than the rest of the city. And so if we don't tackle construction and infrastructure in a way where we can weatherize as well, then we are failing our city.
Yeah, yeah. A whole lot to talk about there. So we're gonna have to wrap it up.
Yeah, sounds good.
We covered a lot of ground, I think, in just a handful of minutes. So thank you so much for joining us. Primary day is May 21st. Big election. We encourage you to use Committee of 70's nonpartisan voter guide. You can find it at ballot.70.org. You can also download the nonpartisan We Vote app wherever you download your apps at home. And thank you to Thomas Skelton Harrison for providing their generous support to make these broadcasts possible. So thank you so much, and Adrian,
Thank you.
good luck on the trail.
All right. Thank you.